What's up everyone, Dustin Jones here in the S3 Race Shop, where we're just now finishing up our brand new race car and getting ready for the first big race of the year. Well, a big part of that is mounting up brand new wheels and tires for the race car. And something that I see a lot of people struggle with is mounting beadlocks. We always hear a lot of questions about that. So today I'm gonna walk you through the steps that we take to mount up a set of beadlocks. The first thing that you gotta know before you mount a new set of wheels is to check for valve stems. I've made this mistake plenty of times, mounted up full set of beadlocks, torqued everything down and realized I didn't have the valve stem. So before you get started, pop your valve stem in your wheel, grab the wheel, let's get it going. So first thing you're gonna wanna do is pull your beadlock ring off. Usually they send a couple of bolts holding it down, but you've got to get this beadlock ring off before you ever start mounting this thing. And if you notice, when you pull that beadlock ring off, it makes it slightly narrower in the outer diameter, and this helps to make it easier to slip the tire over here. And today we're gonna do it without a tire machine. And so, yeah, you could do this by hand in the garage. Most tires, whenever you get them, you're gonna notice they've got dots on them. These dots are gonna mark the heaviest and lightest part of the tire. So the yellow dot is gonna mark the lightest spot on the tire, which you wanna line up with your valve stem because the valve stem is typically the heaviest section of the wheel. To make this easy, I grab my favorite lubricant, come in here and I'm gonna spray the inside lip of the tire, basically the bead of the tire. I'm gonna lube it up really good. And this is so when I push it down on the wheel, it slips right on there. I also wanna lube the inside edge of the other bead. So this is so it centers up on the beadlock ring whenever we start tight. The side that you just lubed up is the one that needs to go face down on the wheel. And remember, your wheel is gonna be face up when you drop it on here. I like to drop it in, let one side of the tire kind of fall down and then work your wheel around. And then typically on a set of beadlocks, it just drops right on there. Now that you got the back set in there, you notice the front bead is away from the wheel. That's where the trusty 5-gallon bucket comes into play. I like to pick my beadlocks up, set it on a 5-gallon bucket. And what that does is take the weight of the tire and actually push it down on the wheel. So this will help me get my beadlock ring on here a lot easier. One thing that'll help you line this beadlock ring up and center it up on the tire really well is if you go ahead and lube up the bead of the tire. So spray a light amount of lube around the bead of the tire. First thing you're gonna notice is where the valve stem is, there is not a bolt hole. So take your KMC logo, line that up with the valve stems, and that will make sure your actual beadlock bolt holes line up with your beadlock bolts. So I'm gonna line that KMC logo up with the valve stem, and then now my bolt holes line up on both sides. You wanna make sure to tighten all of these bolts by hand first. So I'm just literally getting them started, barely running them down here in the bolt holes. I gotta grab this whole bag of bolts, put washers on them, snug them up all the way around, and then we'll go around and torque them. This is where your trusty dusty roller chair comes into play. So I like to grab just a little bin that'll hold everything in it. So you gotta make sure you put all of your washers on all of your beadlock bolts because you don't want the head of the bolt kind of grinding into the wheels. You want it to spin free and you get a true torque on it. So I just dump all my bolts in there, grab one bolt, one washer at a time, just start running them in by hand. Typically I like to do, like you do on anything, I do a cross pattern. So like I'll start one by the valve stem and then I'll start one on the opposite side and then I'll go a quarter from that, start one on all the corners, because once you get them started kind of in all the corners where there's some threads going, then all the rest of them go in really easy. Now once you get all of your beadlock bolts started by hand and you're sure you've got good thread, the next thing to do is to grab a 3/8 ratchet and your socket and go in a crisscross pattern and snug all of these down. Now that I've got these tightened all the way around, this is when it's gonna get really important. You're gonna wanna grab your torque wrench and you're going for 12 to 14 foot-pounds on these wheels. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but this is a really good beadlock wheel with a wide bead holding section. And so you could almost leave these things loose and they would still hold air. So let me grab the torque wrench and let's see these things tighten down. Now, 12 to 14 foot-pounds, got the torque wrench set. Make sure you're looking at foot-pounds, not inch-pounds or Newton meters or whatever other torque setting you might want to use, make sure you're looking at foot-pounds. Now that we got the torque wrench set up, I'm gonna go around and tighten the beadlock ring in a crisscross pattern again. It's gonna be kind of tough to keep up with which one you're on, but start at your valve stem, crisscross, and do your best to make sure you torque them all on this first torque round. Now that I've tightened all of them up in a crisscross pattern, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna start at the valve stem and I'm gonna go all the way around retorquing these things. The tough part is you need to do this 2 times because as you torque them, it's gonna pull on the beadlock ring a little bit as you work your way around, and then the ones that you started on are gonna get loose. So torque them in a full crisscross pattern and then torque them in 2 full circles starting at the valve stems, and then you should be good to go. With beadlock rings, it's really important that you make sure that the tire is centered up in the ring. So there is one last check that I always like to do on my wheels. You're gonna see this ring around right here at the wheel section. If you use your finger and run all the way around, you can kind of feel and make sure the wheel is centered up with the beadlock. If you do this, this will prevent kind of seeing a wobble in your tire or even difficulty balancing a set of tires on beadlocks. The little ring is about the same, so hopefully some of these tips and tricks I gave you today will make this process easier for you and make you more comfortable to get out there and mount a set of beadlocks on tires.